what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello everyone, welcome to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. My name is Alan. This is Chris that I'm pointing to across the table, but...
Hello, podcast listener land.
Yes, for those of you in audio land, though, not able to see us, we are at a nice rectangular table, facing one another, microphones directly in front of us, ready to go and talk about movies during today's episode. Footcandle Films, this show is where we review some recent films. We also cover a little bit of movie news here and there, and normally end up our show with a online recommendation, something we think you ought to try to check out if you're in the mood to find a film that maybe you're not aware of or hadn't heard of, or maybe had just forgotten about. So that's what we're here for on the show. We do have quite a few reviews to go through today, actually, Chris. I think we may be I know we've reviewed 3 films before, but I don't know if we've reviewed 3 films that are probably all quite so discussion worthy as all 3 of the ones we'll be reviewing today. Is
Agreed.
That fair to say with
this
that?
Maybe a landmark, yeah.
So first off, we'll be talking about the latest Coen Brothers film, Hail Caesar, starring George Clooney and a whole slew of other people. Then we're going to talk about the latest Charlie Kaufman film, Anomalisa, followed by a film called The Lobster, which probably very few of you have heard about, but we're going to tell you all about that film later on, starring Colin Farrell and a few others as well. After a break, we'll do a little bit of recap of the Oscar ceremony that just happened last week, talk about some of our surprises, some of the things that we were right or wrong on with our predictions, and then we will finish up the show with our online recommendation for the episode of a movie we think you ought to check out. Chris, we got a full slate of things. How about we just jump right into it? Does that sound good to you?
Sounds good.
Good. Let's jump right into our first review. It is the latest from Joel and Ethan Coen. It's called Hail Caesar.
Mr. Mannix.
What's up?
The director can't find Baird Whitlock.
Somebody slipped it under my door. We have your movie star. Gather $100,000 and await instructions. Who are we? The future. Hello, Bert.
Hello, Mr. Mannix.
Lawrence, Hobie, thank you all for coming. The studio needs your help. Baird Whitlock has been kidnapped.
This is bad. Bad for movie stars everywhere.
She sings the perfect harmony.
Chris, in looking at Hail Caesar, we have another film from the Coen Brothers. I know for a fact, and this is just kind of putting the disclaimer out there, you and I are big fans of the Coen Brothers in general.
Absolutely.
As I'm sitting here in our Mesh recording studio, I am looking out into a window that actually goes into your office, and I know you have a movie poster up for The Big Lebowski,
yes.
One of your favorite films of theirs,
Absolutely.
Also one of my favorites. You and I saw Fargo together at a very unique screening situation many, many years ago, I think in Philadelphia,
yes.
when it came out. You and I both had a fascination with Coen Brothers films in general. If we look at the last 4 films that the Coen Brothers have made...
And remind me what those are?
I'm getting ready to do that.
Excellent.
The last film they came out with was Inside Llewyn Davis.
Okay.
Before that was True Grit. Before that, A Serious Man. And before that, Burn After Reading.
Okay.
The reason I go all the way back to Burn After Reading is because really thematically and style-wise, Hail Caesar probably has a lot more in common with Burn After Reading than the other 3 films they've done in between. Mm-hmm. They seem to go in a cycle where it's like serious film. You know, not to say that every film they do is serious. There's still comedic parts to it, but it's a little heavier subject matter. But then they always seem to sprinkle in that just really kind of a little more bizarre comedy every few films. Burn After Reading was, in my mind, the last one they did like this style. I don't recall how you felt about Burn After Reading. But I'm asking you as to kind of lead into this conversation. Tell me how this film rates going all the way back to Burn After Reading, comparing to that film, and maybe even have it rates in the last 3 films since then as well. Where do you put this in the Coen Brothers list of just recent films? I don't need you to go back to The Big Lebowski or Fargo, because those are some pretty hard benchmarks to shoot for.
Sure.
How are they doing just in terms of the last 4 movies they've come out with?
Well, Burn After Reading, actually the marketing campaign for Burn After Reading and the marketing campaign for Hail Caesar do remind me a lot of one another. You know,
Yeah.
Burn After Reading just looked like it was a you're just going to be nonstop laughter from start to finish. Well put together trailer. The movie, I hated.
You hated Burn After Reading.
I hated Burn After Reading. I've only seen it once. Maybe if I went into it again now, I'd be a little kinder to it, but I really didn't like it at all.
It didn't work for me either. So I was curious about your take on that.
I did like Serious Man. I was big on that. True Grit, it was okay. And Llewyn Davis, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't like it as much as I wanted to.
Right.
I admired certain parts of it. Oscar Isaac is really good. But I don't know, something, I think it was, it could have been, it was like January, February when I saw it, kind of dark and gray outside, and then to have kind of a really dark and gray film, it
was a darker film than I expected it to be in a lot of places.
Yeah, and it was just kind of a bummer, so I just wasn't expecting it. Hail Caesar, it is, the marketing campaign for it, the trailer was excellent, but it built it up to be a comedy. And we're talking about this film. It's been out for a couple of weeks. I think it is the worst trailer that could have been made for this movie in a way. I'm not sure how you would have made a different one, but selling it as a comedy is not true. And I talked to people before I had gone to go see the film, and they're like, oh, it was okay, but it just wasn't funny, and it didn't really have much of a story to it. And they were just really let down because the bill of goods they had been sold in the trailer didn't hold up. And I think, I liked this film.
Okay.
I liked it a pretty good deal. It's one of the better Coen Brothers movies I think I've seen in recent years.
Okay.
And it probably helps that I didn't walk in the door expecting a comedy. I kind of knew, even though I'd seen that trailer and I was of the same opinion, but fortunately I'd talked to other people who had already seen it and they were like, yeah, it just wasn't that funny. I think, almost every trailer for the Coen Brothers, I mean, if Joel, Ethan, if you're listening, I think from here on out, when you have a movie like this and those big block letters, white letters on black screen, it should always say, like, right before you flash like the actors' names and the rating at the end, it should say, this is not a comedy. Way to beat, take those words off. This is a Coen Brothers film. And like, that kind of says volumes, because almost anything, even Llewyn Davis, was dark, kind of a downer, but does have elements of kind of quirky comedy that's just is kind of their signature style. And if you go in expecting some of those, but you don't expect just to be, laugh out loud funny, you're going to probably be, pleased. This movie, I really thought it had a lot to offer, more of kind of like, obviously it's not a documentary, but kind of a historical perspective on Hollywood.
It was interesting with that regard. I'll give you that.
And I think brief rundown, just for people who are like, Hail Caesar has George Clooney. What's it about?
Sure, yeah.
It's basically Josh Brolin is a Hollywood fixer in the 1950s, and he goes around trying to keep movie stars in line, trying to keep directors, producers in line to make the budget pictures that the studios want them to make, regardless of if they may think it's a piece of junk or whatever. He kind of keeps everybody in line.
Yep.
And supposedly it's loosely based on somebody like this who actually did exist in the 1950s and kind of went around and did this kind of thing. And
Josh Brolin, played Eddie Mannix, the fixer, and George Clooney starring as one of the studio's biggest stars, Baird Whitlock, who is working on a production of Hail Caesar, the name of the film. So it's a movie inside of a movie type of thing. And you got a whole slew of other people playing different actors and directors and everything else. So very interesting cast with that. So you liked it?
I did like it.
Okay.
And I actually, they again mentioned times before on the show, a good mark of a movie to me is that if I walk out and I want to see it again, if I want to see any part of it again, or if I'm basically like, oh, it was okay, but I'm kind of done. This one I walked out and I immediately, maybe I don't want to see the entire film, but definitely sections of the film I want to see again.
Well, so let me kind of stem off of that idea.
Okay.
I liked the film too. I did have a really good time with it. I actually did find it very, very funny. I did not go in with the perception of it being a slapstick comedy. I know the Coen Brothers films well enough to know that, that trailer we're looking at, that's not the kind of film this is. This isn't a bust out loud slapstick, just a laugh a minute funny movie. But this movie was hilarious. There was some scenes I'm still laughing about, thinking about.
Okay.
If I look at this film as more of a really great montage of interesting characters coming together to paint this picture of Hollywood back in the 1950s, it works awesome.
Gotcha.
The main disappointment for me with this film was that I did like so many of these characters and situations so much, but they are all given such a short window of time to actually breathe in.
Sure.
That it's almost like by the time I've really starting to get connected to a character, I don't see them again.
I can understand that.
That's my only disappointment. It's kind of a backhanded disappointment because, I mean, you're basically saying you like the character so much that I wanted to be around them and see more scenes with them. And in a 90-minute or whatever it is, almost 2-hour movie, I got 10 minutes with them, you know. That was my big disappointment. It's like, oh, you almost like you just did a montage of some of these really great characters and situations, and you left me so wanting more and desiring more depth in all the characters than I got. So again, it's a criticism, but it's not really one that a film should have to fix. If anything, it just means that if they ever came out and said that we're going to make a sequel to Hell Caesar that's all about Hobie Doyle, I'm totally on board. Like, sign me up. I want to go see this movie.
Sure.
So that's my thing is I really did like the movie. I kind of walked away saying, that was it. I mean, it's like I wanted more. I wanted these characters more. I wanted to see these situations more. But I did find it very, very funny. I found it really fun to watch. And I'm a big sucker for classic Hollywood behind the scenes films anyway. So of course that spoke right away to that side of it for me as well. So I did enjoy it. I liked it better than Inside Llewyn Davis. I liked it better than True Grit. Didn't like it as much as A Serious Man. That's still one that just really connected with me really well. I definitely liked it better than Burn After Reading. That was also one I did not care for. So yeah, it's in the top upper half of Coen Brothers films for me as far as if I were to rate them top to bottom for sure. So.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines with you that I really responded to it. And I did find a lot of aspects of it funny. Another part of it that I really liked, and kind of like, you know, tribute to old Hollywood, but the times, and I'm right on board with you, same page. But as far as the criticism, they had so many storylines going on. All of them were interesting, and you just kind of felt cheated at the end. You're like,
that's the way I felt. I felt
know,
cheated at the end.
It's not that it was a bad movie. You're just like, I just really would have liked more. But the time that they, and it, kind of a throwaway part, Channing Tatum, he's in this film.
Yep.
And he has a dance scene as a Navy officer.
A really well choreographed made song and dance scene.
I really like, that was worth the price of admission.
I agree.
That scene. Okay. Then you have, and you know, but otherwise very throwaway, not a lot of time spent with him. Scarlett Johansson, great actress. She is a star and does this like swimming, like you've seen those old time movies where they have the overhead shot of all these people swimming in a big pool,
swimming
synchronized swimming type stuff. Yeah, you've seen like clips of that from, but they totally recreate that atmosphere. It looks amazing. That was just really fun to watch them pull that off. Which, granted, I guess it's even easier nowadays because of all technology and camera equipment we have. But still, to bother pulling it off an exact replica of one of those scenes, totally enjoyable.
Yep.
And then, as you mentioned, the one character who I got to spend, I guess, the majority of the time with, and I really liked him with the sequel, Hobie Doyle. He's a cowboy character who normally plays cowboys, and he's being pushed into try to becoming more of like a Clark Gable type character, and it just doesn't really suit him. And it's played by Alden Ehrenreich?
Ehrenreich, yeah. I knew nothing about this actor, never seen him before, but I tell you, it was my favorite character in the whole film.
Absolutely.
He was just so much fun to watch and follow. So
yeah, he was, and some of the comedy comes from him just being very honest and just kind of like, oh, whatever, and kind of his, you know, bright lights, big city attitude towards Hollywood and just kind of being kind of humbled. That was where a lot of the comedy came from me. And I really enjoyed it. Although, two of the characters, I'll say, Josh Brolin and Eddie Mannix, and actually for me, George Clooney, like both of those actors a lot. George Clooney, I felt like really got the short end of the stick. Like I felt like there could have been a lot more there.
His storyline was the most unsatisfying for me because it was so interesting once you realized who he gets kidnapped. And this is early in the film. He gets kidnapped. This is kind of what sets the whole story in motion is he is the lead actor in this big Hollywood production, and now he's missing. So they're trying to figure out, do they shut down production? Do they get a replacement? And what do they do? And the group of people that kidnap him, it's a very interesting storyline that follows him from there. That was the one where when it kind of started to wrap up a little bit, I'm like, oh, there was just so much they could have done with that. And I agree with you. It's a little bit, that's where I probably felt the most cheated, was in that storyline of all the other ones.
And along those same lines, Josh Brolin, playing the character that's kind of the fixer, trying to keep everybody in line, he's kind of having a crisis the entire movie. Mm-hmm. He's deciding that maybe this is all a bunch of trouble. He doesn't really want this. And he's being offered a higher paying job somewhere else and trying to lure him away the whole movie. And I thought and then the decision he makes at the end of the movie, interesting. And I don't know, I felt like there was more movie gold to be mined and wouldn't quite hit on it. So,
well, that's my whole criticism of the film. I mean, again, I hate saying the word criticism because it's basically saying I wanted more of the good things that were in the film. Mm-hmm. But I did feel like at the end of the film, it was a montage of really great scenes and really, really great characters that I wanted it to end up with more. I wanted it to bring it more full force to me. And I did feel like at the end of the film, it's like, oh, okay, well, that means I'm not going to see this character or this character anymore. I had him on screen for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever. Even going down to Jonah Hill's character, Joseph Silverman, which is just a fascinating character is written. Basically, he's the guy that will just do whatever the studio has him to do.
He's like the fall guy.
Yeah. If he has to adopt a child that some actor or actress has out of wedlock just to protect them, that's what he does. If he has to take the fall in prison for somebody, he does it. And I mean, to me, that's funny. That's so funny. But he's in one scene. It's like, I want more. Please give me more of this. And that's my only real criticism of it. It was a great collection of ideas and characters that I wish just amounted to more in the end for me.
Well, and then, that said, as well as at the end of the movie, the movie, I felt like kind of went out with a whimper instead of with a bang.
Yeah,
it wasn't really kind of in a way building to anything. No. It was interesting, okay movie, but it just didn't really have a punch at the final end to kind of tie stuff together.
I think if you go into this film not expecting it to be a rip-roaring comedy and not expecting it to be a solid story, but you go in wanting more to experience some really fun characters, interesting situations, and you love that nostalgia feel of the behind-the-scenes Hollywood 1950s, it's great. It's just, if you go in expecting more on any of those fronts, you're not going to get it.
Right.
That's kind of the way I felt about Burn After Reading. But the thing is, Burn After Reading, I just didn't like the characters as much. And there was just so many other things that didn't work. But it's the same idea. It's just a whole bunch of random little small subplots loosely tied together. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's like it didn't really go anywhere. This same issue, same problem. It's just the characters, the environment, the scenes were so much better that I still enjoyed the film quite a bit. So that's Hail Caesar. It may still be running in movie theaters as you're hearing this review, but it is, if you're a Coen Brothers film, it's definitely one to check out. It's a worthy installment into their filmography. Otherwise, just be prepared and be kind of understanding that it's not your traditional comedy. No. It's not going to have the most complete storyline.
It's a Coen Brothers
It's a Coen Brothers film. Make sure you know that going into it. Okay, so let's move on to our second film, and this is a film from the filmmaker and writer Charlie Kaufman. It is called Anomalisa.
What is it to be human? What is it to ache? What is it to be alive? Each person you speak to has had a day. Some of the days have been good, some bad. Each person you speak to has had a childhood. Each has a body. Each body has aches.
With Charlie Kaufman's latest film, Anomalisa, he got a nomination in the animation category for an Oscar against other films like Inside Out. Well, no surprise, Inside Out won.
Yeah.
But this is a very adult animated movie. Mm-hmm. It describes a man that's crippled by the mundanity of his life experiences, and then he suddenly experiences something very out of the ordinary. Mm-hmm. That's a very concise IMDb description of the movie.
Yes.
But Alan, the big thing about this film, Charlie Kaufman, this is the first time he's made a film like this, where it's stop motion animation.
Right.
For a film that's just about a man with experiencing depression, I think it's fair to say. Mm-hmm. Why do you think this film was made with stop motion puppets as opposed to just using people? And do you think it was an effective use to do so? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I think the choice of using stop motion animation for this, it worked for me. And it's actually something I want to talk about a little bit more with the film too. But as far as a rationale for why you would do it stop motion instead
of just having the actors.
Instead of just the actors doing it. There's one key choice they make in the film, and it really has a lot of impact on the main character that I think would have been really tough to pull off with live actors. And that's the fact that we have 3 voices in the whole film.
Right.
Just 3. And even if you look at the IMDb page of the cast, it's 3 people. Michael, Lisa, and everyone else. And the fact is...
that says a lot.
That does say a lot. It's something that it took me the first 10 minutes of the movie to realize what was going on. But once I realized it, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. Everybody in the film I'm hearing is the same voice. And there's a reason for that. That ties into the story, that ties into a little bit of Michael's mentality at the time. I think for that reason alone, if that was the main conceit, that David, the way Michael is viewing his life around him, and because of that, everybody he encounters is the same voice. There's a real, true, practical reason for that. I think it would have been really, really tough to pull that off technically, visually, for it to have the same impact if it was live action people. Plus, there's the fact that all these people look the same, too. Again, that took me a little while to register because at first I just thought, well, they're just making all their stop-motion puppets kind of look the same. But no, it's very intentional. The actual core faces of everybody else, it's exactly the same. So again, to me, that was the reason why I think the stop-motion needed to be there. Because they had that flexibility. They could be more creative with how everybody looked around them. But yet, the fact that they decided to keep this, for the most part, barring a few key scenes, very grounded in reality. You know, we're in a hotel room. There's nothing really fantastical about the hotel room. It is a straightforward. I mean, I told you after I saw the film, I was in a hotel room the very next night, and it was a weird feeling because it's like, I've been here just last night. I felt like I was here. The hallways, the scenes, everything's very real. But because of the stop motion, they can pull off the whole everybody the same face, everybody the same voice. And there's 2 or 3 scenes that really border on more of the fantastical that I think were obviously a lot easier to pull off with stop motion than you could have in real life. So anyway, that's my answer to that. And I will just say I absolutely love this film. So I want to hear your thoughts on it, though. So I'm totally blown over by this film.
Yeah, this is one of those films, that definitely one of the best films of 2015 when it was released. And I really responded strongly to the film, too. I wondered if it was going to be too much of a gimmick to have it be stop motion. But for all the reasons you said, I think it worked better as stop motion. And I think in a way, because if you would have had the voices and you would have had, it just would have, and you would have caught on to it immediately.
Right.
Whereas, like you're saying, kind of the subtlety of what's going on and the condition that Michael Stone, the main character, is having and what's going on in his head, you slowly have to kind of figure it out. And it's never explicitly said, this is what's going on, this is why he is this way. And I think if it had been with real actors, not stop motion, I think it would have... I just don't think it would have been very
jarring from the very first scene.
Right.
The very first scene, they're on an airplane, and you hear the person next to Michael talking to him, and you don't think anything about it. Then you get to a cab scene, and I still didn't catch on what was going on even by the cab scene. It wasn't until he got into the hotel room and started making some phone calls. And by the time he's calling his wife and son, and the person on the other end, I'm like,
the son sounds exactly like
this is exactly like the bellhop and exactly like everything else. That's when it realized what was going on. See, if it had been live action and you saw somebody's face with a voice coming out that was not the voice, it would have been jarring right away. And I think that wasn't the intent. I also think there's a little bit, I just kind of get the sense that maybe Charlie Kaufman kind of saw this as, you know what, this is a film that, of all the films he's done, this one is, for the most part, pretty straightforward from a realism standpoint.
Sure.
You've got Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You've got an adaptation. You've got Being John Malkovich. You got all these other movies. You got Synecdoche, New York, which are very fantastical elements all through the film.
Right.
It's almost like he kind of challenged himself to say, all right, I wrote a film that, outside of a few key moments, is pretty straightforward realism based.
Sure.
How about I make this film out of stop motion animation? Almost like, let's take the most realistic story I can give with real emotions and real situations that people go through, and let's make it with animation, just because that seems like a very interesting, challenging thing to do. Could be. Yeah.
And it worked. And I'll say, too, as far as emotional impact, you mentioned how basically he sees everybody somewhat the same, but their voices are all the same.
Right.
And then he comes into interaction with a lady whose name is Lisa, and it's voiced by Jennifer Jason Leigh. And because I said it, the voice of her character is different.
Yes.
And he kind of was like, oh my goodness, this person is unique. This person stands out. This can be my outlet to the world because everybody else is just kind of, I'm in this funk or whatever he's in. Their storyline, what I was kind of surprised about was I liked her character. I was so heartbroken, I guess, by some of the events that happened in the film. But the last shots you see of her and how she responds to things for a Charlie Kaufman film especially, but was so uplifting.
Yeah, it was.
And I was not expecting that because kind of, this film kind of it's a comedy, but it, not like regular comedy, kind of like Hail Caesar, but it's kind of dark in some places. And I just thought it was going to really end and just be mega ton depressing.
Yeah. No, it actually had some interesting messages to it. I mean, you can't say that the Michael character necessarily ends at the same point that the Lisa character does, but the Lisa character is the one we're probably the most worried about later in the film.
Absolutely.
And it's the one that luckily, by the last scene, we feel better about her character.
Sure.
And, the thing is, there were some moments, I thought there was some absolutely laugh out loud hysterical moments in the film. And that really speaks a lot to the writing of it. To take what could be this grounded, very more dour, serious a film overall, but yet there were 5 or 6 scenes that I can distinctly remember really laughing out loud on.
Sure.
That were just great. And it really worked well. And then the 1 or 2 scenes of when it got to be a little fantastical, a little bit dreamy, a little bit just more going on in his mind as opposed in reality, they were just jarring enough that they worked. In other words, you knew something was going on. You knew that maybe we're exploring in his mind or how he's seeing things, but it wasn't over the top and just beat you over the head with these messages. It was just really tastefully well done the whole way through the film. So yeah, I really love this movie. So I thought it was great. Really, really great.
Cool. Well, that's all I had to say. Would you like to move on to The Lobster?
I guess we could do that. Let's move on to our third film review, which is a film called The Lobster.
As you understand from your brother's experience,
if you fail to fall in love with someone during your stay here, you'll turn into an animal.
Would you like to dance? Mind if I join you?
It's no coincidence that the targets are shaped like single people and not couples.
Have you thought of what animal you'd like to be if you end up alone?
Yes, a lobster.
A lobster is an excellent choice.
Okay, Chris. I'm going to read the description for The Lobster straight from IMDb, just because I love reading this description out loud. In a dystopian near future, single people, according to the laws of the city, are taken to the hotel, where they are obliged to find a romantic partner in 45 days, or are transformed into beasts and sent off into the woods. Now, if you had just jumped into our show and heard us talk about Anomalisa and heard us talk about The Lobster, you'd probably be thinking, oh, The Lobster must be the stop-motion animated film, because this sounds so ridiculous to actually make a live-action film out of. Nope, other way around. Anomalisa stop-motion, The Lobster acted by real people, such as Colin Farrell, starring as David. We also have Rachel Weisz. Mm-hmm. We have a whole slew of other people.
John C.
Reilly, probably the only other really big name that people would recognize from the film. Chris, this is from director Yorgos Lanthimos, who I know you've seen Dogtooth, another one of his films. I have not. So this was my first experience with one of his films.
Okay.
I'm just going to throw it out there.
Okay.
I had a freaking riot with this film.
Awesome.
I really enjoyed this film, and I did not think I would.
Really?
No.
Huh.
I have some issues with it, but I'll get to those in a little bit.
Okay.
But let me just kind of start out because I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts on this film. I really, really like this film. To me, it's got to start with an interesting premise, and this film has the most fascinating premise you can imagine.
It's all right there in the description.
Right there it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we start out learning that David is basically getting out of a relationship, not by his choice. And because he's now single, he has to go to the hotel. And the hotel for me was one of the most fascinating scenic locations in that it is this slightly older style country club hotel.
Kind of like the Shining Hotel.
Yeah, it is. It's not like your newest contemporary hotels. And it's got this out in the wilderness, out in the middle of nowhere kind of feel to it. And it's just, the hallways and the rooms and just the layout of everything, the ballrooms where they have a lot of their big get-togethers was just awesome. And so the idea when you go to this hotel, you have to find a partner within 45 days. They give you a kind of a countdown number of days. You get a voice message on your phone every morning letting you know how many days you've got
10
left.
10 days left.
And you have to prove to somebody, the people running the hotel, that you have found a mate and you are in love and you're ready to move on with your life. And then they will let you kind of have a little bit of a trial period and then you can go out into the world. And if you don't in 45 days, you get transformed into an animal of your choosing, which is nice.
Right.
You get to choose your animal.
Right.
But then there's also a whole subculture of people living out in the woods who are completely against this idea of having to find partners. So they are dedicated to being single and only single, and you cannot be with anybody else.
Right.
So you've got these two dichotomies going on, and it's the movie is kind of in two halves. You got the first half of the movie that's truly in the hotel. You got the other half out in the woods.
Right.
So I've rambled about this film. I do really, really like this film. I really want to hear what you thought about it.
Well, I've really liked it as well. And the director, Yorgos Lanthimos, his other two films that I'm aware of, The Dogtooth that you mentioned and Alps, which was his follow-up after Dogtooth, they are both equally odd.
Okay.
And with this film, I feel like this is his most accessible that he's made yet, where it's like a storyline that you can absolutely lock onto and say, I mean, it's a weird storyline, but it's a storyline.
But you can at least follow it.
Yeah, like Dogtooth is just very surreal and upsetting. Alps is kind of, the same type thing, but this, and it was his first English language film where the majority of the film was in English, and he's got big stars in it like Colin Farrell, Rachel Weisz, and John C. Reilly. So that was kind of a landmark for him to kind of make a. But the good thing is he's still holding true to the type of films he wants to make. Where you read that description, it's like, well, what is this film about? And it's kind of like it's about what you bring into the film with you. I feel like he's pretty even-handed on not trying to make a lot of judgments. Basically, this film is about relationships and about how people see relationships and how society sees relationships. And without making a judgment, like a worse director or somebody who's not quite as clever would make a film saying like, oh, it's wrong to force everybody into being married or to force everybody to always have to be a girlfriend, a girlfriend, boyfriend. And then another person would say like, oh, the single life is really the way to be because you get to be more free. And like
they made both sides look pretty ridiculous.
Right. And it's like, I think that takes a very skillful director and a very skillful script to be able to do. And it made me, Colin Farrell, I like him okay anyway. I liked it really in Bruges is the last thing I can think of that I really liked him in that.
Sure.
And this is a totally different type of role, and he just does it so well. Like I can't really imagine anybody else kind of in his role because he just plays this, for lack of a better term, like a schlub kind of loser dude. But he...
unpretentious, just very unassuming, and just kind of going along with things. I have a couple minor quibbles about the film. Well, one quibble we'll talk about in a moment.
Okay.
The one thing that just rubbed me a little wrong as I was watching the film is I've heard some people talk about Wes Anderson a little bit with this kind of film, and I see it. Okay, some of the interesting locations and the interesting framing of shots and just the whole mix of kind of this eclectic mentality style, like the ballroom scenes, especially. That's to me a Wes Anderson style where you've got the two people up there singing a duet, and it's just this very odd. But the only part that really kind of got me a little bit is, and I understand this was a creative choice to have the line deliver this way, but so much of this just monotone delivery.
Yeah.
That was a Wes Anderson thing where after a while it just started to get to me a bit to say, okay, it feels like it's aping Wes Anderson. Like, let's have everybody respond in a very monotone, deadpan response to everything. Granted, if I'd never seen a Wes Anderson film, I would have loved that style of dialogue delivery in this film. having seen all of Wes Anderson's films and them being so prominent in film culture, it's hard to walk away from this film thinking, it just feels like it's a little bit of an aping of that delivery of dialogue and style of dialogue. There again, like I said, that was and I used the quibble because quibble to me is a very small negative thing, but not a major negative thing.
It's kind of, I'm taken aback. It's kind of mind blowing because I'd never considered Wes Anderson in the same conversation as Yorgos Lanthimos. Mm-hmm. But now that you mention it, I can see exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I guess Wes Anderson, I feel like it's done for comedic effect. He basically makes comedic. Right. Usually if you want to call them message movies or deep movies, I kind of like, I've bemoaned many times, I don't like being beaten over the head with something, right? Yorgos Lanthimos, he makes message movies. Mm-hmm. That's like, he's made 3 films that I'm aware of. All of them are saying something. Whether or not you can really understand what they're saying is a different matter. But they're all like heavy, deep. There's a lot to kind of unravel and figure out. Mm-hmm. And with this, that's kind of what this movie, and I guess because I feel like the aim of it is so different than a Wes Anderson movie, I never really thought of it. But you're completely right. I'll give you an example of something that you're right. The delivery of it was completely deadpan, but it made it like all the much more funnier. But it was very Wes Anderson in the ballroom that you're talking about. 2 characters have finally, not Colin Farrell's character, but 2 other characters have met a match, and they're kind of celebrating the fact that they met a match, and they say, okay, the next part of this is you guys go out on a boat, or on a yacht floating in the water, and you spend like a week or so as if you're on vacation. And if you can survive that, then you're free to go back to the city and you're a couple. So they're kind of like saying these rules, and the people in the crowd are like clapping very mechanically. And the woman who's kind of the overtaker or overseer of this resort says, and if you encounter any arguments, discussions or yelling things that you can't settle among yourself, we'll solve that by giving you a child or giving you children. And that will help. It helps so much. Or she said, that's a, but and that's delivered in just the straightest step forward. And of course, as listeners probably know, if you have children, the last thing you want to do if there's a problem is throw in children because that just makes everything worse. But like the deadpan delivery of that, it was done for comedy, but like it's striving for something even more. And I think and I like, equally like Wes Anderson, but that just kind of, that encapsulates what Yorgos Lanthimos is all about, is like making social commentary. And he's being funny in that. But I can see that criticism that in a way it's kind of robotic.
I really just saw it from a style standpoint.
I see that.
And not from a messaging, not from what the intent is, but more the style. It's this ambiguous time period. Yeah. It's like, well, you don't really know. Are we in the 60s and 70s? Are we in modern day? And he's not really interested in telling us either way.
Absolutely not. And in his other films, he's the same way.
Right. Yeah. And that's a very Wes Anderson thing, too. There's so many Wes Anderson films you watch, you're like, I don't really know what time period I'm in, and that's okay. The deadpan delivery, the very interesting characters, all that was very much an Anderson thing. But you're right in that every one of those dialogue scenes that I found really either interesting or funny, there was something behind it. I even think about a scene early in the film where David's checking into the hotel getting registered, and the person registering says, well, do you want to register as a homosexual or heterosexual? And, he had to sit there and he's really thinking about it like, okay, what do I want to register as, Right. And he's really thinking about it more of like a process. Like, okay, well, if once I choose this, that's kind of what the expectation everybody's going to have of where I need to get my mate. So they're going to put me into certain programs.
Right.
So I need to think wisely. I'm not really able to fluctuate while I'm here. Right. And it's funny the way that dialogue happened because it was so mechanical, but yet at the same time, that they're trying to make a point of saying, we as a society, we try to peg somebody into one path or the other. And that's what's damaging.
And see, that's totally... I like Wes Anderson. I'm not discounting you, Mr. Anderson. Please don't get your feelings hurt. But that is what this guy is all about, is taking that scene. And then, David even says, oh, well, I'll do, bisexual. It's like, nope, that's no longer an option.
No longer an option.
Heterosexual or homosexual. It's like, okay. Like, it's making commentary on really big issues, sexuality and everything, but doing so in such a odd and unique way that I don't even consider it quirky. Like, a lot of people get hung up on quirk of Wes Anderson. I love it. But it's like, no, it's this guy's style and he's getting at something, but doing it in such an original, bizarre way. I like Wes Anderson's movies, but I would never classify them as bizarre.
No.
And that's what this guy's all
And I
about.
also don't classify them as message movies. I don't feel like there's nothing he's trying to get a message across anything. You know, of course, the big underlying message throughout this film that I know the director's really trying to implore is this idea that as you're staying in this hotel, the goal is to find somebody that it becomes your mate. Mm-hmm. And you can't fake it, because if you fake it, you get in trouble.
There are consequences.
That's bad.
Serious
Don't fake having a relationship with somebody. It's got to be real. But the way that they determine, people tend to find out if they're going to have a relationship with somebody, is to find that one quality about them, one feature, either physical or something else that they can associate with. Mm-hmm. With some, it's that they have a limp. Yep. You know, with some, it's that they're short-sighted. And again, that's the whole concept. It's like, oh, look, somebody's coming in with a limp. Maybe that's my match. I'm so excited that somebody's coming in with a limp because I have a limp also. And again, making that comment of, that's unfortunately how too many people in society are like, oh, well, I'm that way. I need to find somebody who's exactly like me, and that's how we need to be a partner. When obviously what they're trying to show is that's really a very artificial way of developing relationships off of those more physical features or things that are not as deep and not as meaningful. So it's really interesting that David the whole time is kind of excited when he meets somebody who's short-sighted like he is, because that's how he sees being a match, and it plays into the ending and to some degree as well. So,
yeah, I really liked this film. I really liked, you said it was kind of two pieces.
Yeah.
It's the out in the forest part as single people, mm-hmm. and then it's in the hotel trying to become a matched person. I feel like I really responded to the first part with the hotel. I felt like that was the stronger part. Not that it fell apart when it went to the forest.
It did lose a little bit though.
But I felt like it started to become a little bit more looser. And then I was kind of like, okay, where's it? And so much so that the ending, I felt it kind of just,
I do want to talk about the ending without being spoilery here, but it is one of those, and I am never one that feels like a film has to button everything up.
Sure.
I'm okay with ambiguous endings. I am okay with open-ended endings. This one I'm still wrestling with a little bit. It was a very open-ended ending, mm-hmm. leaving with two characters, and you're not quite sure what the next step is to be. One character's planning to take an action that's very questionable, but yet when you look at it in the sense of the whole film, I guess it kind of makes sense. But we still don't really know if that action took place or not. Anyway, it was the epitome of an ambiguous open ending. And I'm okay with that. I don't fault the film for it. It's just I needed maybe just a little bit more of a nugget of information to know what we're trying to get at with that ending. So I kind of have my positives and negatives. I mean, it's mostly positives. I think fascinating premise, hilarious at times. I think it had a really great sense of some really great dry comedy that meant something. Every line and scene meant something.
Right.
I loved the fact that it was a great mix of some really interesting comedic dialogue, plus some very not as shocking it sounds like or depressing as a Dogtooth was, or maybe, but still had its few moments where it's just like, whoa, okay, well, they just kind of went in a whole different direction now with that scene or this shot or whatever it may be.
John C. Reilly getting punished with a toaster.
John C. Reilly, a dog, a biscuit woman. You know, there's just some scenes and some moments where it's like, whoa, okay, that they just kind of went in a whole nother direction on some things.
It can be dark.
Yeah. But I like that mix. I like the fact that one moment there's a line of dialogue that's just absurd, ridiculous, hilarious. And the very next scene, you're kind of taken aback by a very shocking moment. I liked it. I liked all that. My negatives were, just I felt a little bit of the Wes Anderson style dialogue. It was a little aping in some places. It felt like anyway. And then the ending, I'm still wrestling with. Really the last shot. I mean, we're talking like that last long shot.
Which, full disclosure to everyone out there in podcast land, as we were getting ready to record this, I pulled up the film and I was like, I just got to watch the edit. Not that I forgot, but I just wanted to make sure I remembered exactly what the
there wasn't anything you missed in this shot.
That the ending was to the lobster. Without spoiling anything, after watching the ending again, there's no way I work with that. It was definitely, and you would probably agree, it was very intentional. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because the director wanted to say, okay, it's putting the choice. Yeah, it's leaving the ending kind of, murky, but I think it's like, no, there's one or two things that happened here. What do you think? And he wants to make and then what does whatever you think happened kind of maybe says a lot about you or whatever. And I think that's just, I don't know, very challenging.
Well, just like we gave a warning on Hail Caesar to people who go to check it out, not to go in expecting a rip-roaring comedy, not to expect this fully formed storyline. I will say to people watching that go to choose The Lobster, if you've heard us talk about it and you decide you want to watch it, which I do recommend, I think it's a really good movie, just understand that this is the kind of movie that the ending shot would roll and then the credits would start. And normally in a room full of theater people, you're going to have groans. It's like, God, I can't believe they just ended the film that way. Yeah. So just people be aware of that.
You know go in with that
I think
the reason
mind.
I respond to him, and I think he's Greek. I think he's from Greece. To me, he is the successor to David Lynch.
I can see that.
He makes movies that are kind of bizarre, that have this quirky stuff, that do have some funny things, David Lynch films. And like that's why, in a way, until you'd mentioned it, I'd never really associated him with Wes Anderson. But I can see that, but they're still stylistically
well, it's like
different.
Lynch, I can see Lynch from more of a content standpoint. Wes Anderson from a style standpoint. You know? Because that's really all I see with Wes Anderson is the style. Style of delivery, the style of the scenery, the style of the time period. And that's the Wes Anderson side of things I see. But no, it's not the content, the messages, or any of that. That I can see more of a Lynchian feel to that as well. So I really, really like this film. I'm actually kind of anxious to see it again.
Okay.
And so honestly, Chris, 3 for 3. I really liked all 3 of the films we talked about today.
Well, I tell you, too, a pairing of Anomalisa and The Lobster, I don't know that if you could walk out of that and be psychologically sane because of some of the stuff it just makes you think about and perceptions like, and kind of like the human condition. Well, it's like I could see those being saying like a psychology class or like, sociology class. Let's watch these 2 films about human interactions and behavior.
Yeah.
And what those that could be an entire
course. It's
course
a perfect complementary movie about relationships.
Yeah.
And like you look at The Lobster and it looks at the construct of relationship, what it means to be single or with somebody, and what does society put on us as far as these forms that we're supposed to be in when it comes to relationships with others. And then you've got Anomalisa, where someone who's knee deep in relationships, has been in relationships for years of varying styles, and kind of the impact it's having on them and how they relate and see other people. So it's almost like you've got The Lobster talking about the constructs of relationship. Anomalisa is an exploration of one person whose relationships have started to really take a toll on him over time. So it's a really interesting double feature. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, since I was on record saying that I really loved all 3 movies we reviewed today, rank them for me. Which one of the 3 is your favorite? If you had to watch them over again, which one would you watch again in a heartbeat?
Wow. Probably Lobster's at the top.
Okay.
And then Hail Caesar and Anomalisa. Anomalisa, even though it's a great film and I really liked it, I don't think I would really get a lot out of a second viewing.
Okay. Sure.
Because it is kind of very straightforward, except for 2 instances that you mentioned that are kind of like dream sequences. But it was good and definitely very original. People should see it. Hail Caesar, I want to dig into more of like kind of like the artifice of how they did scenes, So, but definitely up at the top, Lobster. Yeah, I said it's a good measure if I finish watching and immediately want to watch the whole thing. I immediately want to watch that whole thing again. Yeah. And it was like 2 hours or so running time. To me, didn't feel that long at all. Like It just was engaging, and I guess because you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on?
Well, I'm a little mixed. I mean, all 3, I love the films. I'm an Anomalisa first.
Okay.
The Lobster second. Hail Caesar third.
Okay.
But again, that's 3 really good films that are all 3 very enjoyable films. What about the score of The Lobster 2, which was a very staccato, sharp moments, kind of sometimes would just jump out of nowhere score-wise, and I thought really were fun. Kept you on your toes a little bit. I don't know. It worked for me as well. And then John C. Reilly, which is an odd choice to have in this movie because he didn't seem to fit anywhere at all. But yet that's also something I think they played with.
Oh, yeah.
Is the idea that he is very much a American where nobody else really seemed to be American.
Right.
He had a little bit more of a doofus quality to him where nobody else really did. It was an interesting choice to have him in this film, but it added something to it that I think was needed. So
I would agree.
Yeah.
John C. Reilly, I like him anytime he's on screen, and this was absolutely no exception.
So 3 very interesting, different, but very good films that we had to review today. Hail Caesar, Anomalisa, and The Lobster. And I know Anomalisa should be coming out on video on demand or online pretty soon. Hail Caesar was still in the movie theaters when we recorded this. The Lobster, probably not making a whole lot of rounds in different movie theaters. It may be a little while before you can see it online, but we do recommend checking it out when you do. All right, we're going to take a really quick break. We come back, we're going to do some quick Oscar recap of the Oscar ceremony from just last week, as well as give our recommendation of the episode for something we think you ought to check out online or some other available format. So you're listening to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. We'll be right back.
Local authors, illustrators, and storytellers come together to create Storytime Station at The Mesh. Storytime Station is a video podcast that works as a virtual storybook. Each show features a new children's book and new reader. So gather the whole family to listen, learn, and laugh at Storytime Station on themesh.tv.
Welcome back to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. Before we get back into our show, just a quick reminder that you are listening to this show on themesh.tv. That is an actual network, kind of like your ABC or an NBC, but it's all online and it's all on demand, which is what's so great about it. All of the shows we have on the Mesh Network, you can go and listen to it anytime you want to. You can go to themesh.tv, which is our website, and you can find all the programs and shows available through the network. Listen to any episode, whether it's the most recent one or one from years ago, on demand. You can download it, play it in your browser, whatever's more comfortable and convenient for you. The great thing about all the shows on the Mesh Network is that you can subscribe to any of them. On all the show pages, you will see a link taking you to Apple iTunes, or if you need to listen to it on Stitcher Radio, or if you have your own podcast software you use, you can use any of those tools to find our show and subscribe to it. And what that means is every time we put out a new episode, it will get pushed automatically to your device, whatever your device you use to listen to podcasts. And I will say, Chris, I just found out the other day that the latest version of the Apple TV, which maybe many of our listeners have gotten for Christmas or in recent months, has a new podcast app on the homepage of the Apple TV. So there again, you can subscribe to our show through your TV set. Gotcha. If you're one of those people that you'd rather have it playing on your TV in the background and listen to us, you can certainly do that. I will say what's really fun is we have a show on the Mesh Network that is a video show. It's called Anglers and Appetites. If you're at all interested in fishing and or gourmet cooking, it's kind of an odd mix of a show. Huh? They go and do some fishing in some really unique creative areas, and then they talk about how they fix it for a more high gourmet food serving. And it's a nice dichotomy of a show, but it's video-based. Okay. So you can watch that podcast on your Apple TV or other TV device where you can see podcasts, and you've got your on-demand TV show right there waiting for you. So themesh.tv, please check it out. We'd love to hear some thoughts from you on the network and our show in general. So, Chris, back to Footcandle Films, and we did our reviews of the first half of Hail Caesar, Anomalisa, and The Lobster. All three getting high marks from us, yes, and ones we wholeheartily recommend everybody check out. So let's turn our attention to the Oscars. You know, at the last episode we recorded, we did our Oscar predictions.
Sure.
I'll go ahead and spoil it right now. You and I, we didn't do too hot in our picks, okay?
But I'm actually kind of happy that I did as poorly as I did.
Well, that means there was a few that we expected to win, but we actually were going to be happy if they didn't win. That didn't. So I don't want to go through all of them. You know, sure, everybody can go online and see the results of the Oscars if you did not see them yourself, or see the ceremony yourself. But I did want to hit a few that I thought were some interesting outcomes and get your thoughts on it as well. Let's just start with the big one up front. Spotlight won Best Picture.
Yay!
Now, if you had told me that 3 months ago, I would have said, yeah, it sounds about right. Spotlight was getting all the buzz. It seemed to be the critical darling. That seemed to be the one everybody thought was going to win. And then came along a little film called The Revenant with Mr. DiCaprio that seemed to just take all the oxygen out of the room. And it seemed like, I honestly thought going into this that The Revenant was going to clean sweep Best Director, Best Film, and Best Actor.
Right.
But instead, it did get Best Actor. It did get Best Director. I'm sorry, Chris.
I know.
But at least you can take solace in knowing that your nemesis in the directing world did not get Best Picture this year. Right. And it went to Spotlight. I know you're happy about that, but
I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, happy about it. And the only thing that could have been better is actually if Revenant would have gotten movie and director would have gone to like the spotlight guy, because that way I wouldn't have had to see Inarritu like talk. It would have just been like the producers of the film.
You're just
I know it's brutal, but I am very. It was one of the ones. If you remember from our episode, I picked The Revenant, but I said I'd really like for Spotlight. I think it's the better film, and it kind of when you say best picture, not best actor, not best director, but best picture. To me, there was just really no question in my mind which one I thought was better, The Revenant or Spotlight. Yeah. It was like absolutely Spotlight.
I'm perfectly fine with the way the awards fell out, because I will say on record, I do think from a director's position, The Revenant was quite a feat. Okay, I will give it that from a directing standpoint. But I'm glad it didn't win Best Picture, because to me, Best Picture takes all of the elements combined.
Sure.
And where I do think The Revenant had a really good starting turn for DiCaprio and was well directed, I don't think as a total picture it was the most impressive. Spotlight was the most impressive from a total picture, but it wasn't the most impressive from a directing standpoint. So again, I was perfectly happy with it getting Best Picture and not Best Director. To me, Spotlight is an ensemble film. It is a talkie film.
It is.
It is a historical document film. It works on all those fronts, and it's really, really, really well made. It's not a directorial style film.
No, it's kind of, and I think that was what pleased me with it, is it just kind of, it doesn't try to dress it up, doesn't try to make it fancy. It just lets the story tell itself. Yeah. But you're right. I guess if you're going to say like directing wise, it was nothing special. He did a good job, but it was a very mechanized approach as far as, so I don't know. I like both films. I like them okay, but yeah, I guess you're right. Director should have gone to Inarritu, I guess.
Now, I will say when we look at the acting awards, DiCaprio for Best Actor,
and I will say, he did a really good.
I think we were both in favor of that. He was the
reason why I liked the film at all, because I thought his performance, he did a good job, moaning and suffering. So
yeah. Brie Larson for Best Actress, we kind of all picked that as well, and I think well-deserved. I think that was not really a surprise for anybody. Alicia Vikander for Best Actress, Supporting Actress. A little bit of a surprise for me. I have seen The Danish Girl since our last recording and before the Oscar ceremony.
See, I still haven't seen it.
I still would have given it to Jennifer Jason Leigh, even though I did not care for The Hateful Eight as a movie. Her performance was really, really good in it. Vikander was fine in The Danish Girl. I just didn't see a whole lot that really just jumped up and just really made it a best award-winning performance. But it was solid. It was
something
good.
That was really surprising to me is, okay, I haven't seen, disclosure, I haven't seen either Carol or Danish Girl. Mm-hmm. You have seen them both.
Yes.
But because of like where they are in the cinematic world as far as like art house movies with kind of talking about time periods and people's struggles. And it's like, I felt like they would do the whole canceling each other out. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that's why I kind of thought Jennifer Jason Leigh, plus there was the buzz that said that she would probably win. Body of work, and she gave a really good supporting term, because the other two ladies in the category, Rachel McAdams and Spotlight, she was okay.
Yeah.
But
Rachel McAdams never, to me, had much of a shot. Vikander was fine, and she probably would have been my second choice out of the five, I guess.
Really?
I thought she was better than Rooney Mara was. Rooney Mara's good in Carol, but Vikander was a little better. I just thought Jennifer Jason Leigh kind of had the more showy role and got to step outside of her normal bounds a little bit more. Vikander, I could pretty much tell you, other than the accent, possibly, that's probably the way she really, that's her nature, her personality is the character she played. So I always admire it more when somebody steps outside of their comfort zone more and more. But I will say, actor supporting role, I was very happy with Mark Rylance winning, although it did cost me a vote on my Oscar ballot, because I had Sylvester Stallone thinking he was pretty much going to win. I was really surprised. I think a lot of people were when Mark Rylance got it. But I was very happy because he was my personal pick. I think his performance was outstanding.
Okay, and same exact boat with you. I had heard all the buzz and the nostalgia vote. And actually, Oscars, maybe, okay, they've got the whole, diversity thing. They need to work on that, obviously, with, having African Americans in film. But I will say, I think they are steering away from being overly nostalgic and giving people awards for just their body. Like, Sylvester Stallone would have been a perfect thing. Like, Hollywood likes their own, and they did it. Like, that would have been the typical thing to do. And I was very surprised that they didn't go that route. So good for them for not being predictable. And I will say, if you go back and listen to our review, which, as you mentioned, we've got that stockpiled on themesh.tv. You can go back and listen to that review where we reviewed Bridge of Spies. Mark Rylance made that movie.
Oh, yeah.
He was the best thing about Bridge of Spies. He was just so good. I wish he could have been in the movie more. And I could not be happier that he was surprised, but couldn't be happier that he won.
It was a great surprise. It was very nice. Just a few other minor points. I mean, really, animated film, Inside Out, no surprise. No. I would have liked Anomalisa, especially now that I've seen it since then. But Inside Out makes sense, I guess. I will go back and say, just on one more note on that supporting actor, Mark Rylance. He's still my choice. He's still the guy I wanted to win it. I will say, I've seen Creed since then. Creed's a really good movie. And Sylvester Stallone played a much better part than I expected him to. So I would not have been mad if he had won the Best Supporting Actor. But I'm very happy Mark Rylance did.
Sure.
Okay. Mad Max Fury Road didn't win any of the big awards, but it did win a lot of awards. I don't think anybody when this film was in early production would have said this film is going to win 6 or 7 Oscars.
Right.
Okay. But it won both of the sound awards. It won production. It won makeup and hairstyling. It won editing, and it won costume design. So yeah, you could say it's not the big category ones, and it was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director and didn't win those.
And a lot of people were really sad because George Miller, he's been around a while, and
directing, I would have been really happy if George Miller had won. I wouldn't have given Mad Max the Best Picture. I still think Spotlight probably had that overall just total.
But you could maybe see directing because it was such a feat to put together.
But I am just happy to know that Mad Max can walk away saying we won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Oscars on Oscar night. That's pretty impressive.
Quick side note: the other reason why my Oscar ballot really tanked this year is because stupid me, sentimental me, I picked Star Wars for sound editing and sound order. And of course, Mad Max won that. If I'd have been thinking clearly.
Yeah.
But
your head was in the clouds. It was in nostalgia lane.
It was in space. You know, I just so wanted Star Wars to walk away with something.
It didn't win. It didn't win.
But surprise, I'll go ahead and jump forward on this category. Special effects.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Ex Machina. How great was that? Because I never thought that had a chance.
Well, especially not only that Ex Machina was a smaller film from a people knowing about it standpoint, but budget wise, it's such a smaller, low budget film. So basically, the argument is that they went up against Mad Max, they went up against Star Wars, and they beat them on visual effects with an awards. That was pretty impressive.
And it's something where you could say Mad Max and Star Wars action movies. They're all about the effects and all about the Ex Machina, it was an android, but it was that wasn't the main point of the movie. It wasn't the flash of the movie. It was just, but it so well done.
And I will just say, I thought Alicia Vikander was much better in Ex Machina than she was in The Danish Girl. But if it means that she's going to get some greater roles because of winning the Oscar, then I'm fine with her getting the award for the one she did. Okay. Really, I mean, nothing else really surprising. On the writing, I'm always fascinated by the writing awards. I kind of felt like might be the way it goes with Spotlight winning Best Original Screenplay and The Big Short Best Adapted. I thought both very warranted, and that made good justification sense to me. So overall, good stuff. The Hateful Eight won for Best Original Score, which was something I was really championing for and thought was good.
I was happy about that.
Little surprised the song from Spectre won Best Original Song. Not one of the best James Bond songs we've ever had.
Not only that.
The Lady Gaga song was getting so much heat building up to the award ceremony and then the walk away with nothing.
I just never... we saw Spectre. We reviewed it here on the show. I think maybe you just talked about it.
I talked about it, yeah.
But I saw it, and it just... I mean, granted, it's coming on the wings of Adele's Skyfall, so it's kind of hard to follow that up. But just,
just didn't work.
Just nothing. And then, that song, the Lady Gaga's performance and everything. I think if there again never happens, but if you had the Oscar voters vote after they actually saw those performances,
true,
it's kind of like and actually because of the weight of that performance, I was like. And I had voted for the 50 Shades of Grey song just because I figured it was all over the radio and that's the one popular-wise, that's the one that would win. But after I saw that, I'm like, well, clearly clearly that song, even though nobody's heard of it, clearly that's the one that's going to win. If Oscar voters could have re-voted, I think they all would have been like, yeah, clearly that song.
And plus, I mean, and I'm not here to critique the ceremony itself. Overall, I could give or take the actual style of the ceremony.
Sure.
I'd be perfectly happy if the whole ceremony was 20 minutes and just rattle through all the awards and let them come up and get their awards and you're done. I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Right.
This whole 4-hour spectacle is a little much.
It's ridiculous.
But even the performance of the song from Spectre, I thought was horrible that night.
It was
really
too.
bad, production wise. And the Lady Gaga one was very theatrical and big visual effects to it and all that. And I'm also frustrated the fact that there's 5 nominees, but they only let 3 of them play.
Well, right. So then,
supposedly there was a little bit of a news item a couple weeks ago where the 2 other nominees were basically told, yeah, we're not going to have you come play.
Really?
So it's like the 3 bigger names get to come and perform their songs. The other 2 that nobody knows don't get to perform. Now, granted, that doesn't affect voting because the voting's already done by the time of the ceremony, but still, I think it just sucks. You know, if you're going to do...
That really makes you want one of those that didn't get to come win. But you know there's no way they would do that. Because, I was disappointed at that too, that I kind of felt like I felt gypped for them that they didn't get to perform. The other thing that kind of irked me was, if you remember, it was I think maybe last year. I think this is when this happened. But the Selma song won, as opposed to Everything Is Awesome from the Lego Movie.
Right, sure.
And the Selma song was a good song, but I felt like it was all kind of what we associate with Oscar typically. It was that emotion. It was like, not necessarily nostalgia, but we're going to pick an important song
the
to win.
That's it.
Whereas, like, if you think about a song that was integral to the movie, that was such a big part, it's like Everything Is Awesome.
Sure.
There's no way that wasn't like at the core of that movie.
Sure.
Whereas I think the Selma song played in the credits or something, like at the end of the movie.
At the end of the film, I think, yeah.
So to me, so that's why when it was this time, I was like, yeah, there's no way the Gaga song's not winning because that's about something. Whereas this is just another toss away James Bond song. So
and it's like one of the weaker ones in recent years.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, because I was following several people talking about it on Twitter, and they were kind of shocked as well.
Yeah, that was really surprising to me. So absolutely. I just want an Oscar ceremony. You know how I'm a big college basketball fan. When they announce the NCAA tournament brackets, they do it in a 30-minute show on CBS, and they rattle through all the 64 teams. They show you the brackets, they show you where they are, and then they spend the last 15 minutes doing analysis. That's what I want for an Oscar ceremony. Give me a 30-minute, 45-minute presentation, knock through all the awards, let them have their opening speeches, do the in memory of the ones who passed away.
I'm sorry, that was awesome with David Grohl. I like David Grohl anyway, Foo Fighters.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tradition. You got to do that. But skip the monologue, skip all the funny bits, skip all the cutaway video clips. Oh, that's just...
Here's the thing.
Put them up online later and let people enjoy them. Let's just have the awards.
They were progressing, and I thought we were going to be done by 11 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were clipping.
That first hour was pretty quick.
It was like bang, 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 bang. They were clipping through them. And then about the time they did the 20th anniversary of Toy Story or whatever with the puppets thing, then they did the stupid Star Wars droids, which there was no point behind that.
Well, the point was... Because Star Wars isn't going to win Jack tonight.
So we're going
to this is the biggest movie in the last however many years. We need to acknowledge it somehow.
So like those two things right there, that I started growing. I'm like, okay, here we go.
We're back
now we're not going to. Now we
put
put the brakes on. But my wife made a good point because of course they cut to it. She said, no, the point of the Star Wars droids was Jacob Tremblay sitting out in the audience, like stood up and got excited.
No,
He's
that was
like,
cool.
Oh,
That was kind of fun to see.
That was neat that it made this little boy's night that he got to see the Star Wars things.
Yeah, but still, I say do away with all that. Keep the ceremony under an hour. Give us all the awards, and then let us spend however many hours online and on other talk shows digesting it and talking about it. Anyway, that's just my personal thing. I think it would. There's still a lot of people out there that kind of roll their eyes when they hear about the Oscars because they just think it's so overdone. So anyway,
I want to make a plea to the Oscars, but then to, I guess something like Apple iTunes. I want you guys to put out packages of the animated short films, the short film live action, and the short documentaries prior to the Oscars.
Yeah.
So that people can see them.
Wouldn't that be great if a couple weeks before the ceremony you could actually watch them all? Because again, those are the categories I never know how to vote
And there's
for.
such good things. And I thought that was biting commentary, but very true. Louis C.K. for the short documentary. He's like, look, this is the award that matters tonight. None of this other stuff, because these people are taking their award home in a Honda Civic. You know, it's like this, and it's so true. Like that's the stuff. Like you can gauge the future by these people that are making shorts now. Maybe they will get a documentary or a feature because of their work. And it's just so hard to see them. It's so frustrating.
But I will give the Oscar ceremony credit for not regulating those awards to some off-ceremony night award ceremony like they do some of the other technical awards.
True.
They could do that so easily.
They could.
And say, well, you know what, documentary short subject, we're just going to do it this special other event, and we'll just recap it tonight. So the fact that these people get up on a national stage, international stage on ABC to accept an award for a film they maybe spent months out of their life working on and took all their money they could to do, it's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
But I do agree with you. It would be nice if we could see them and actually recognize their work instead of scrambling to figure it out after the award ceremony. And by the time that happens, sometimes we forget about them, and it's a shame. Right. And I'd love to see them get more attention. So I'm with you on that. So that was the Oscars. I mean, overall, I am pleased with the way the awards turned out. There were some nice surprises, ones I did not expect the Academy to go with. Documentary, Amy, I think we both felt like that was a really good documentary. A little disappointed Look of Silence did not get it, just because that's 2 in a row that the guy didn't win. Oppenheimer didn't win.
Actually, and my whole reasoning there, again, just trying to think, if there's any rationalization, which there's not. It's completely irrational. It's award season. But I was thinking the Nina Simone documentary and the Amy documentary would cancel each other out.
Your whole canceling out philosophy is not working.
Does not work. No, don't use it.
2 in a row you thought would cancel out.
Doesn't work.
So I'm happy Amy won. I mean, to me, Amy, Look of Silence, both are deserving. Either one I would have been happy winning Best Documentary. I do admire the Amy documentary because they could have made that so traditional biopic documentary, but they didn't. They made it very creatively and interesting. So that's the Oscars. We'll be looking forward to talking about the ones for next year.
There you go.
Because The Lobster is going to be Best Picture nomination, right?
Best Original Screenplay, maybe?
I think technically it's a 2015 film, so I don't think it matters anyway. All right, Chris, we're at the end of the show. This is where we like to talk about a film that we caught up with or are just reminded of that you should be able to see online. And mine's got a little bit of a caveat in that mine is available online, although you can't rent it for another week or two, and I'll explain it in a moment because it's a fairly new, recent film that we've already discussed earlier in the show. But with that, let me turn it over to you, Chris. What do you recommend as far as a film that you think people ought to check out or be reminded of online?
It's a film that I really wasn't aware of. I happened to see it pop up on Netflix, and I checked it out, and I really liked it. It's called The Experimenter. And it stars Peter Sarsgaard as the main guy in the movie. He plays the scientist, or I guess psychologist. Sorry, he's not a scientist. But it's based around the story of Stanley Milgram. And he's the guy, he was in 1961. Famed social psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a series of radical behavior experiments that tested ordinary humans' willingness to obey authority. So thank you, IMDb again. This was the guy that set up experiments where people were supposed to give shocks to somebody in a different room, and they would progressively go up in intensity of shock, and regardless of the other person in the room or in the other room being shocked, yelling at them to stop or whatever. And it was all this, experiment about authority and about what that, why people would go on doing things if they knew somebody was being hurt or, it's very interesting documentary. So that in itself, just an exploration of that whole experiment was interesting. But the form of the film was also interesting in that they did all these really random, bizarre things. For example, the guy who's playing Stanley Milgram, Peter Sarsgaard, he addresses the camera at random times throughout the movie, like direct on, like he's talking right to the camera. And it would just like sometimes in the middle of a scene. And then the other characters are like kind of frozen or they're still talking, but so just kind of odd things like that. Or he's giving one of these random monologues at one point, walking down a hallway, and an elephant for no reason comes out behind him and starts following him down the hallway. Just like these random, bizarre. But you think about it, and the whole film is about psychology and seeing things as being artifice or not being real, or what it says about the human psyche. Just, it's fascinating. So that's definitely going to be my pick. It's The Experimenter, or just Experimenter, and it's Peter Sarsgaard's plays Stanley Milgram.
And where might I see this film?
It's on Netflix.
It is on Netflix.
It is on Netflix. It may also be in iTunes. I'm not quite sure about that. But and then Winona Ryder, she plays Milgram's wife. So it's kind of nice to see Winona Ryder acting again.
That's good.
Yeah. And it has some pretty random. The cool thing is some of the people that get brought in to be the test subjects are kind of, just random cameos that are kind of interesting. There's Anthony Edwards. There's John Leguizamo, like some big names that kind of come in. And they're only in there for a minute or 2 minutes. And Jim Gaffigan is in the movie and plays kind of a significant role. And is just weird to see him in like a serious movie.
Yeah, no kidding.
He's really good. So
you think it's on Netflix?
It's definitely on Netflix, called The Experimenter. Or maybe it's just Experimenter. I don't actually see them using the. So just Experimenter.
Okay. Well, I'm on board. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
Experimenter. Yep, here it is. Okay, cool. Awesome. I am adding it to my Netflix queue right now. Boom, added. Okay, so my film, we mentioned it earlier already. And, because it's an Oscar-nominated film, I have a hard time saying it's like a gem you need to go seek out. But I got a feeling a lot of people aren't going to get a chance to see this film otherwise. It is the film Carol by Todd Haynes. I know we haven't reviewed it, and it's kind of the time slipping, so we may not be reviewing it on the show. So I figured I'd go ahead and try to throw it in as a recommendation.
But you're telling me, I've heard of the film. I'm one of those people that did miss it. You're saying definitely.
I think you should check it out.
Okay.
I'm not a huge Todd Haynes fan. I just his Dylan film, I'm Not Here, just didn't work for me. Okay. And really, I'm drawing a blank on his previous films. I know he's done several. And when I heard about this film, and I knew it was also in contention with the Danish Girls floating out there, both had to do with kind of sexual relations, kind of unapproved sexual relations at the time that these films took place. I thought, okay, so it's just another film I just didn't really have any interest in seeing, not because of the subject matter, just it seemed like it was already kind of being done to death out there. But what we have in Carol, Todd Haynes' Carol, we have Kate Blanchett starring as Carol and Rooney Mara as Therese. And it's a real simple story. It's basically Therese or Rooney Mara is an aspiring photographer. She meets an older woman named Carol, someone who has had relationships with other women before. They have a relationship. And what's the most interesting thing about this film is it's well acted, it's well directed, it's beautiful to watch. It's shot on, I think, 16 millimeter film, so it's got this real grainy quality to it as well.
Okay.
But it's a very classically done film, okay, in that the music, the style of cinematography, the costuming and all that, it's just very, very elegant and very of its time and really just works as a complete picture. The acting, really solid, as you would expect with Kate Blanchett. She's really good. Rooney Mara is good as well. And I was just really drawn into the story and the characters. I mean, they played Carol is a much more interesting character than maybe the synopsis would give you, of her just being this older kind of aristocrat woman who actually has relations with women. There's a lot more going on under the surface, and you kind of chip away at that a little bit. We've got also as her husband Kyle Chandler, who I really like. He plays Carol's husband.
So she's married. Okay.
Oh yeah, she's married. Yeah, okay. And the film is really about society's views of this relationship, and you can just see constantly how she's having to butt up against the societal norms, whether it's her husband, whether it's other people in the community, and it's just it's a very much a movie of the time.
Okay.
And to me, it was a great exploration of what the views of what they considered to be outside the norm sexual relationships were of the time. And for a Todd Haynes film, it's a very straightforward film too. I mean, there's nothing weird about the film as far as the way it's put together. There's no really bizarre ways to approach the subject. It's pretty straightforward, but it really, really worked for me. I will say too, to me, very satisfying ending. I'm a big ending guy. You either got to make it very open-ended and ambiguous, like a lobster, or you've got to give me something really satisfying and work it together. Don't give me something that's weak. Okay. Like I did feel like Hail Caesar, I agree with you, is a little bit of a weaker ending.
Sure.
This movie had an ending moment and shot that just like, yep, that's exactly what I wanted out of the end of the movie. That's it. So I will say Carol, I think is worth checking out. I think it's a really good movie. And it's one that started to get a little kind of backlash, I think. Critics, especially when it wasn't nominated for as many things. I think people started to turn on it a little bit. I just think it's a really good movie. So okay. I liked it a lot better than I expected to, that's for sure.
Cool.
Okay, so we've got 2 movies to check out. Carol, I know as the time of recording, you can buy online through iTunes and Amazon and all, but it'll be available for rent, I think, by like mid-March. So maybe by the time you're listening to this, it'll be available to rent. The Experimenter is on Netflix right now. So if you got Netflix, you can go watch it right now for free, basically, or your $9 a month, whatever it may be. So we've talked about a lot of good films here during the show. Hail Caesar, Anomalisa, The Lobster, all going to be out in some varying degrees of availability over the coming months. We've got The Experimenter and Carol as our recommendations, and then we did a little recapping of the Oscar ceremony, which was some nice surprises. Sure. Overall, this is a very happy, positive episode we recorded, Chris.
I know.
We're not mad at any of the films. We're not mad at anything that happened in the Oscars. We're not mad about it's just everything's happy. Everything's great. Everything is awesome. Sorry, I had to just dig in. A little pain from last year. Sorry about that. All right, so this has been Footcandle Films with Alan and Chris. As again, a reminder, you can check us out on themesh.tv to find out what we've said in older episodes. You want to go back and kind of maybe you saw a film that we reviewed a long time ago and you've just recently seen the film. You want to go back and hear us talk about it, that's the great way to do it. Go do a search, find us talking about this film, play that part of the episode, boom. That's what On Demand can do for you. Chris, if somebody wanted to reach out to us or communicate with us in any way, what would you recommend they attempt to do?
You can always drop us an email at info@themesh.tv and just let us know of an upcoming film you want us to review or give us some comments about how we got one of our reviews wrong. You can also follow us on Letterboxd, and that's LetterBoxd, so without that last E. And Alan and I both keep a diary on there and tell what movies we're watching and sometimes write short little reviews. So that's, one of 2 ways you can keep up. Also, if you do use that monster juggernaut app called iTunes, you can always subscribe to us, but then also give us a star rating on there. Let us know how we're doing as a show. It helps other listeners find our podcast if they're interested in listening to 2 guys talk about film. Last but not least, we, as Footcandle Films, are also putting on a film festival again this year.
We're doing it again?
We've decided we're up for some more punishment.
Sequel.
Yes, it's the sequel. That's right. It'll be in September 23rd through the 25th, 2016. So if you're interested, go to our website, footcandle.org. There you can learn about the Film Society that helps drive this podcast, but also there's a button on there that you can learn more about the film festival, and you can also find ways to submit a film if you are a filmmaker and would like for your film to be shown.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking forward to a good weekend in September. We had a great first year. So this is the intimidating sequel.
That's right.
We're a little nervous, because you set a high standard for a really great quality event, and you got to kind of match it. And we know exactly how all of you, the Francis Ford Coppola felt after The Godfather.
That's right.
We know how Richard Donner felt after Superman 1, the motion picture, having to do Superman 2. We know how whoever the director of Breakin' was when they had to do Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. It's a lot of pressure. And we totally are feeling that pressure right now. So we hope everybody will at least check it out, the festival, when we start selling tickets this summer and when we start getting people in September. And maybe make plans to come visit us in Hickory that weekend. We'd love to have you here. So for all of that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for letting us come into your audio player, computer, whatever it is you're listening to this, and we hope to hear from you soon. Until next time, this has been Footcandle Films. I'm Alan saying goodbye, and Chris saying
see you in the ticket line.
See you later.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.